You've been carrying the weight for years. You solve the complex problems, you see the massive flaws in the system, and you deliver elite results. Yet, you watch helplessly as the lazy, smooth-talking mediocrities get the promotions, the money, and the respect. You think your intelligence is your greatest asset. It isn't. In a world run by insecure, fragile egos, displaying your brilliance doesn't make you a king. It makes you a target, a threat, and a workhorse. If you are tired of being punished for being the smartest person in the room, your strategy changes today. Do not skip this video. We are about to decode Machiavelli's most dangerous law, the dark art of weaponized incompetence. Most people hear that and miss the brutality inside it. They think it means laziness. It does not. They think it means surrender. It does not. Machiavelli was exposing a ruthless principle of power. The person who appears harmless is often the person gathering the most information. The person who looks unimpressive is often the person nobody bothers to guard against. And in a system governed by ego, visibility is danger. The moment you make other people feel small, insecure, replaceable, or exposed, they stop evaluating your value and start plotting your containment. This is why your life feels so backward. You thought competence would buy freedom. Instead, it bought assignments. You thought insight would buy respect. Instead, it bought resentment. You thought if you kept proving yourself, the system would finally reward you. But the system does not reward brilliance in proportion to truth. It rewards whatever protects hierarchy, soothes fragile people, and keeps the machine comfortable. That is corporate psychology in its rawest form. The person who solves the problem becomes responsible for the problem. The person who sees too much becomes inconvenient. The person who speaks too clearly becomes a threat signal. And now the forbidden question: what if the people you think are stupid are actually playing a much darker, much higher level game than you are? What if that manager who knows less understands one thing better than you do: how to survive above his competence? What if that colleague who acts confused has learned that visible capability attracts exploitation? What if some of the people you dismissed as mediocre are not more intelligent than you, but more strategic than you? That possibility should disturb you, because it means your high IQ burden was never only intellectual. It was tactical. You were showing the whole board to people who were trained to hide their cards. In this video, you are going to understand weaponized incompetence in its real Machiavellian form, not as childish failure, not as sabotage, as camouflage, as selective under-signaling, as dark psychology turned inward for manipulation defense, as a way to stop being overworked, underpaid, overexposed, and emotionally trapped inside systems that feed on your performance. You will see why the 48 laws of power keeps returning to the same cruel truth, why corporate psychology punishes people who solve too much too early, why the high IQ burden creates exhaustion instead of status, and how systemic leverage is built by becoming less obvious, not more. By the end, you will know how to wear the mask of the fool without betraying your standards, how to stop triggering the envy of weaker people, how to gather information while others underestimate you, and how to become a silent architect who controls outcomes without advertising intelligence. You will stop behaving like the brilliant mule everyone loads with weight. You will become the one who lets others reveal the structure, the motives, the gaps, the fear. You will learn how to play smaller while becoming more dangerous. If these ideas resonate with you, hit that subscribe button for more top-tier content. Also, drop a play dumb in the comments so I know you're ready. Let's dive in. The first thing you need to understand is this: intelligence is not threatening because it is intelligent. It is threatening because it exposes. If you see the flaw before everyone else, you expose their blindness. If you solve the crisis too quickly, you expose their dependence. If you speak too precisely, you expose their vagueness. If you perform too consistently, you expose their mediocrity. And if you do this inside a hierarchy run by fragile egos, they do not feel grateful. They feel endangered. This is the psychology of the threat. And if you do not understand it first, hiding your intellect will backfire because you will still secretly expect fairness from an unfair structure. You will still assume your value is being measured objectively. It is not. It is being filtered through envy, insecurity, politics, and status anxiety. The reward for doing good work is always more work, period. That line sounds cynical until you live it. You become the emergency contact for everyone's incompetence, the fixer, the translator, the person who can be trusted with impossible deadlines and broken systems. And because you can do it, they give you more. Not more status, not more authority, more load. They convert your competence into availability. Your excellence becomes a tax bracket. This is one of the ugliest truths in corporate psychology. The system does not ask who deserves the most. The system asks who will carry the most without immediate revolt. And if that answer is you, you will be used until your brilliance becomes burnout. That is the high IQ burden no one warns you about. You do not only think more, you are expected to absorb more, tolerate more inefficiency, fix more carelessness, and remain humble while doing it. If you outshine the master, he will not promote you. He will destroy you. Maybe not openly. That is too crude. He will sideline you, delay you, bury your ideas under committee language, praise you privately and ignore you publicly, keep you too valuable where you are. Give your innovations to a smoother subordinate. Rebrand your clarity as arrogance. Rebrand your frustration as poor teamwork. Rebrand your standards as lack of political maturity. This is not accidental. This is Machiavellian tactics operating beneath professional language, and it does not stop at work. In friendships, the dynamic is the same. The person who always has solutions becomes the unpaid consultant. The person who is emotionally composed becomes the unpaid therapist. The person who sees through nonsense becomes intense or hard to talk to. Your intelligence is tolerated right up until it forces other people to confront what they are avoiding. Then suddenly you are the problem. This is where dark psychology becomes visible. Most people do not consciously think, I will exploit the competent one. They simply move toward the easiest source of competence and away from the discomfort of accountability. They assign, defer, flatter, delay, and extract. They use you because you make extraction look efficient. The smartest animal in the jungle isn't the one roaring on the rock. It's the one blending into the shadows. That is why visible brilliance is often a tactical error. You are not in a meritocracy. You are in a human system. And human systems are ruled by emotion first, logic second. Machiavelli understood that. The 48 Laws of Power understood that. Corporate psychology proves it every day. When you advertise superiority, you invite containment. When you become the obvious expert, you become the obvious workhorse. When you make your value too visible too soon, you attract responsibility without leverage. So stop asking why the room punishes intelligence. Ask a colder question. What does the room fear losing if your intelligence becomes undeniable? Status, authority, narrative control, plausible deniability, comfort. Once you answer that, the whole environment becomes readable. And once you can read the fear, you are ready for the mask. Weaponized incompetence, in its strategic form, is not genuine incompetence. It is controlled underexposure. That distinction matters. This is not about failing at important work, sabotaging outcomes, or becoming sloppy. It's about refusing to broadcast the full extent of your capacity to people who have not earned access to it. It's about understanding that capability shown at the wrong time becomes a liability. It is about preserving systemic leverage by appearing less dangerous than you are. By playing dumb, you bypass their ego defenses entirely. You become invisible. And invisibility in power dynamics is often worth more than applause. The average person cannot resist reacting to obvious brilliance. They either cling to it, compete with it, or resent it. But they relax around someone who seems merely competent, mildly curious, and non-threatening. They talk more freely. They brag more openly. They reveal biases, insecurities, alliances, blind spots. They stop performing because they do not feel observed by a predator. That is the contrast principle in action. By appearing lower, you cause others to reveal their true height. This is why some of the people you think are dull are actually operating on a much darker level. They have learned the value of under-signaling. They ask the simple question and let everyone expose themselves in the answer. They act less informed than they are, so nobody hides the real motive. They let louder people talk themselves into mistakes. They let ego-driven people claim space, then quietly build the file, the relationship, the timing, the exit. That is weaponized incompetence at its highest level. Not looking useless, looking unthreatening. And there is another reason this works. It breaks your addiction to display. Many intelligent people are still secretly ruled by a childish need to be recognized as intelligent. You want them to know you see more. You want them to feel the gap. You want them to admire the precision of your mind. But that desire is expensive. It makes you reveal your position before you have leverage. It makes you correct too early. It makes you show your cards just to stroke your own pride. Stop showing them your cards just to stroke your own pride. That sentence alone will save years of your life, because every unnecessary display of intelligence creates three problems. First, it gives insecure people a reason to resist you. Second, it tells lazy people exactly who to dump work on. Third, it removes the element of surprise. Once everyone knows what you can do, they begin planning around your utility instead of respecting your autonomy. The 48 laws of power returns to this lesson again and again. Law 21 says, to play a sucker, to catch a sucker, to seem dumber than your mark. Why? Because perception is architecture. If they think they have already sized you up, they stop guarding themselves. If they think you are not ambitious, they stop tracking your movement. If they think you are merely compliant, they reveal where the seams in the structure actually are. But there is a danger here. If you wear the mask of the fool without inner discipline, you will start feeling insulted by the underestimation. You will crave the moment of revelation. You will want to prove yourself. You will break character just to restore your ego. That is exactly how the game resets. I'm going to show you exactly how to wear the mask of the fool without losing your self-respect. But first, you need to kill the impulse that makes smart people so easy to exploit. You are still driven by the need to be acknowledged. That is the hidden weakness beneath the high IQ burden, not intelligence itself, hunger. The need to be seen, recognized, appreciated, validated as exceptional. And manipulators, mediocre managers, and status-conscious peers can smell that hunger from across the room. They know that if they deny you acknowledgement, you will work even harder to earn it. They know that if they give you a little praise, you will deliver far beyond your compensation. They know that if they challenge your competence, you will overperform just to silence them. True power isn't about proving you are smart. It's about controlling the outcome. That is the pivot. The old you wanted to be recognized as the smartest person in the room. The strategic you wants the board. The old you wanted admiration. The strategic you wants optionality. The old you wanted your superior logic to be visible. The strategic you wants systemic leverage so strong that visibility becomes unnecessary. The difference is enormous. When you need acknowledgement, you become predictable. When you need acknowledgement, flattery works on you. When you need acknowledgement, insult works on you. When you need acknowledgement, delay works on you. When you need acknowledgement, you can be baited into overexposure. This is why so many intelligent people become unpaid assets inside dysfunctional systems. Their competence is real, but their ego hunger is even more visible. They cannot resist correcting the room. They cannot resist solving the puzzle. They cannot resist being the one who knows. And every time they prove it, the system smiles and hands them another burden. The reward for doing good work is always more work. Period. So the first internal shift is brutal but liberating. You must detach your identity from public demonstration. Your intelligence is not a performance. Your intelligence is an instrument. An instrument is used when needed, not displayed for reassurance. If a violinist started smashing the strings every 5 minutes just to prove it can sing, you would call that madness. Yet that is what many smart people do socially and professionally. You keep forcing brilliance into the room to calm the insecurity that no one sees it. Machiavelli would call that self-betrayal. Because in Machiavellian tactics, the strongest move is often refusal. Refusal to reveal, refusal to correct, refusal to become emotionally activated by underestimation, refusal to advertise range before the battle begins. That is not passivity, that is disciplined concealment. And let's go darker. Some of the people above you are not more capable than you. They are simply better at distributing perception. They understand corporate psychology well enough to seem calm instead of clever, collaborative instead of threatening, available instead of disruptive. They know when to speak, when to defer, when to let someone else own an idea, and when to attach themselves to the result. That is why they rise while you grind. They are managing the human system while you are solving the technical problem. What if your intelligence has been real, but strategically naive? That is the question that changes your life. Because once you ask it honestly, you stop taking exploitation personally. You stop calling every unfair outcome stupidity. Sometimes it is stupidity, but often it is systemic leverage. Often it is people using optics, ego protection, and timing better than you do. They are not outthinking you analytically. They are outpositioning you socially. That is why dark psychology is useful here. Not because you need to become sinister, but because you need to stop being innocent. You need to understand how perception guides power. You need to see how the room responds to threat. You need to recognize that corporate psychology rewards those who manage others' emotions while quietly protecting their own capacity. And once your ego hunger is subdued, you can finally use the mask correctly. Now we get practical. How do you actually deploy weaponized incompetence without becoming a liability, a fraud, or a joke? First, you underpromise and overcontrol. That means you stop volunteering the full speed of your mind. You stop solving in public what can be solved in private. You stop announcing every flaw the moment you detect it. You give measured answers. You let others work to understand what you already saw. You reserve your highest output for moments that increase leverage, not just workload. Second, you ask strategically simple questions. This is one of the cleanest Machiavellian tactics in existence. Instead of walking into a meeting and explaining the whole system, you ask one innocent question that forces everyone else to expose their assumptions. How are we measuring success here? Who owns this decision? What happens if that deadline slips? What's the contingency if the vendor fails? Simple questions, quiet questions, but they reveal everything: competence, panic, evasion, politics. By appearing curious instead of superior, you gather more data and trigger less resistance. Third, you let silence do the lifting. In corporate psychology, the person who fills every silence often reveals need. The person who can tolerate silence forces others to speak from discomfort, and discomfort is where the truth leaks out. A fragile manager over-explains, an insecure colleague name drops, a lazy teammate volunteers excuses too early. A controlling executive reveals what they are actually afraid of. You learn more by withholding your display than by delivering a monologue. Fourth, you create selective scarcity around your competence. Do not become instantly available every time a crisis appears. Do not answer every question at first contact. Do not train the system to expect emergency miracles on demand. Delay slightly. Ask clarifying questions. Narrow scope. Respond as though your attention has cost, because it does. This is how systemic leverage is built, not by hoarding talent, but by making access to it non-casual. Fifth, separate capability from visibility. You can be excellent without making excellence theatrical. Keep private notes, build systems quietly. Document your impact, save proof. Make your work legible when needed, but do not narrate your intelligence in real time. The silent file beats the loud self-promotion. When the moment comes for negotiation, review, promotion, exit, or conflict, you present evidence, not personality. Watch how people's behavior shifts instantly when you deploy weaponized incompetence in the workplace. The insecure boss relaxes because you are no longer challenging his ego every hour. The lazy coworker reveals exactly how much he depends on you because your instant rescues stop arriving. The manipulative teammate becomes easier to spot because without your visible competence to hide behind, their vagueness stands alone. The smooth talker overcommits because he assumes you are not tracking the board, and you, for the first time, begin feeling the difference between being needed and being powerful. Needed is exhausting. Powerful is selective. Sixth, never confuse camouflage with self-erasure. This matters. You are not becoming smaller internally. You are becoming quieter externally. Your standards remain high. Your actual work remains solid. Your ethics remain intact. If safety, law, or core responsibility require clear competence, you deliver clearly. Weaponized incompetence is not malpractice. It is strategic under-signaling in environments that punish visible superiority. Seventh, let other people own harmless ideas when ownership is not the real prize. This is one of the hardest lessons for intelligent people. You want credit because you can see the origin. But if giving someone verbal ownership buys you freedom, access, protection, or timing, let them hold the trophy while you keep the map. This is not weakness. This is systemic leverage. The ego wants authorship. Power wants outcomes. This is the exact method powerful operators use in business, politics, and negotiation. They let the room underestimate motive, complexity, and timing. They appear softer than the structure they are building. They appear slower than the math they are running. They appear reactive while they are already positioned 3 moves ahead. And if you try this strategy without one final law, it will completely backfire, because camouflage without an endgame turns into quiet exploitation. You need the last move. The purpose of the mask is not survival alone, it is positioning. If you only hide your intelligence to avoid pain, you will still remain in defensive mode. You will feel safer, yes, but you will not gain power. The final stage is different. You use invisibility to choose timing. You use underestimation to gather proof. You use restraint to build options. And then, when the board is yours, you act with precision. This is the silent checkmate. It happens when you have documented enough value that you can negotiate from strength. It happens when you have watched the political landscape long enough to know who is insecure, who is competent, who is allied, and who is dangerous. It happens when you stop reacting to daily disrespect and start planning exits, pivots, proposals, and boundaries that alter the structure itself. It happens when you are no longer trying to win each interaction because you are preparing to win the position. At the end of this video, I want to give you the precise mental framework that lets you laugh internally while everyone else panics. Here it is. You are not there to be correctly perceived. You are there to accumulate leverage. You are not there to display range. You are there to decide when range becomes useful. You are not there to impress weak people. You are there to prevent weak people from controlling your access to resources, recognition, and time. That mindset changes everything. When the boss underestimates you, you do not rush to correct him. You study the gap. When the colleague talks over you, you do not compete for air. You study the incentives. When the group loads you with work, you do not immediately rescue the structure. You study dependency. When friends constantly lean on your competence, you do not keep proving loyalty through labor. You study who only values you for function. This is where Machiavelli becomes practical. The prince who reveals every weapon creates coalitions against himself. The prince who seems ordinary while consolidating control becomes difficult to stop. That is not just old political theory. That is daily life. That is corporate psychology. That is how hidden power survives long enough to mature. The 48 laws of power, Machiavelli and dark psychology all point to the same brutal truth. Open superiority is often less useful than controlled ambiguity. If they cannot fully read you, they cannot fully organize against you. If they do not know your limits, they test less confidently. If they misjudge your depth, they make mistakes in front of you. And this is what exploited geniuses rarely understand. You keep thinking the game is to prove you are indispensable. No. Indispensable people are trapped. Systems chain themselves to indispensable people and then refuse to release them. The real game is to become strategically costly, politically hard to exploit, and structurally free to move. That is systemic leverage. Systemic leverage means your value is real but not casually consumed. Systemic leverage means your competence is documented but not endlessly donated. Systemic leverage means your presence improves outcomes, but your absence reveals what the system cannot replace. Systemic leverage means you are no longer the loudest mind in the room. You are the quiet architecture beneath the room. This is why the smartest move is often to let others underestimate your ceiling while you quietly build alternatives. Savings, skills, networks, reputation with the right people, not all people, a body of work that can travel, a set of relationships not controlled by one insecure gatekeeper, a private strategy stronger than your public role. Then one day the same room that called you ordinary watches you leave, rise, negotiate, or redirect the structure, and they call it sudden. It was never sudden. It was concealed. You began this journey as an exhausted, overperforming genius, constantly exploited by inferior managers and friends. You were carrying the failing structure on your back and calling that value. You were solving too much, revealing too much, proving too much. And because you were so visible, you became easy to use. But now you see the deeper law. Intelligence without camouflage becomes labor. Intelligence with strategy becomes power. Subdue your ego to gain actual power. That is the final challenge. Subdue the part of you that needs applause. Subdue the part of you that cannot bear underestimation. Subdue the part of you that keeps correcting the room for free. Subdue the part of you that mistakes being needed for being respected. Subdue the part of you that would rather be seen as brilliant than positioned as untouchable. Because once your ego stops demanding recognition, your mind becomes lethal in a new way. You stop wasting energy on display. You stop triggering envy for no reward. You stop feeding the system free genius. You become measured, deliberate, camouflaged. You become the silent architect. If that is the shift you are making, comment, play dumb. Not because you are shrinking, because you are done advertising your edge to people who only respond by exploiting it. And subscribe if you are serious about learning power at a higher level. Most people will teach you to work harder, prove more, and make your value obvious. Very few will teach you Machiavelli without sentimental filters, dark psychology without naivety, weaponized incompetence without self-sabotage, corporate psychology without illusions, and the high IQ burden without romanticizing burnout. This is for the people who are tired of being the brightest workhorse in the room, the people building systemic leverage, the observers, the quiet planners, those who gather power unseen. And whatever you do, do not stop now. The on-screen video matters more than you think, because once you learn how to hide your intelligence, the next problem is even more dangerous, knowing exactly when to reveal it. Watch the next one immediately if you are ready to stop performing and start controlling outcomes. See what others miss, know what others fear, become who others can't.